Okay, so today's Tanya teaches us, the Alter Rebbe, of course, Tanya is based on the idea that we all have a godly soul and an animal soul. The soul of God in us, which is our real essence, is, because the essence of everybody is really beautiful, wants basically that we should be godly and goodly, and the animal soul in us wants us to be like an animal. What gives me pleasure, what gives me fame, not what gives me pain, not what gives me shame. And that's the animal soul in us. Now, there's 5 categories of people. So a tzaddik is somebody that not only is able to control, every single person has the ability, and that's why there's a very big evil. It happens often in societies that become prosperous. So what happens is the instinct, the Rebbe Marash said that if you were to castrate all the intellectuals in his day, they would all abandon all their philosophies. Because, there's a story, a guy's in a theater, and he says to the guy in front of him, "Do me a favor, can you take off your hat? I can't see." So he says, No, it's my policy to wear hats. So he gets frustrated, takes off his hat and he throws it away. He says, "Don't make out of a bald head a policy." So sometimes it's not an idea that creates a passion, it's a passion that creates an idea. Again, it's not an idea that creates a passion. A healthy person thinks of what's true, becomes passionate about it. But an unhealthy person or immature person, or just a person that hasn't gone beyond their instincts. So people say, I identify as this kind of sexual orientation. I may also have a certain desires, but I don't identify with them. That's not the be all and end all of my life. Right. I like money. I don't identify as a $10 bill, No. Right? So because because my life has to be about something meaningful, not just some kind of animalistic desire that every single animal has. It's the lowest of the low to consider myself based on a simple bio-instinctual desire. I like chicken. I don't identify as a chicken. So the fact that I have a desire, in fact, most of our desires.
Chicken eater.
Yes, right. Most of our desires have a positive element. Obviously, the sexual instinct, creates unity in a marriage, and it creates children, which is the greatest thing. Without that, you don't have the greatest things in life. But at the same time, if I leave my desires unchecked, then the desires consume me. So it's exactly like our basic instinct is, let's say, pleasure and not pain. But if all I do is try to get pleasure, then I become a drug addict and I ruin my life and everyone around me. Yeah. But if I go beyond myself, I say, well, I'm not my desires. Those desires come from my animal, but I am, even on the most basic level, a human being. And what makes every human being different from an animal is that we have a prefrontal lobe. We can observe reality. They can't observe reality. They are a subject of their desires, whereas we can subject our desires. And that's what distinguishes us from an animal. So our job then is to say, okay, so what is the right desire? What is good? And if you don't ask that question, then as we see with those crazy, it's not really liberalism, it's radicalism infected by generations of Russian disinformation, etc., these crazy ideas.
I don't think it's the Russians. I think it's just disinformation from the
it is
crazy left.
But they don't realize.
There's also the crazy right. It's like
anything that is radical is always crazy, and it doesn't have like Churchill said, a radical is somebody who can't change his mind and won't change the subject. But the truth is that, just very briefly, I don't want to speak a lot about it, there's a book called Disinformation. Disinformation was written by the top Soviet general that defected to the West, 2-star Soviet general Ian Passipo. He was the head of the KGB of Romania. Just the most basic disinformation plot that many, even Jews, don't understand is there is no such thing as a Palestinian people. It was the Arabs attacked the Jews before there was a state. But they attacked us in 1967. They never called themselves Palestinians. They called themselves Arabs trying to kill Jews. And it never changed. It's just that Russia was smart, and they say, because most of the Russian army is not about guns, it's basically disinformation, misinformation, and they create false narratives. And the bigger the lie, that's the irony of how it works, the bigger the lie, the easier it is to believe, because nobody's going to think, you just made up a people. But the only ancient people that live in Israel are the Jewish people, because an Arab comes from Arabia. He doesn't come from Palestine. Palestine was a name that the Romans gave Israel 1,300 years after was Judea.
Palestine, that was the Roman name.
Well,
That's what they
well,
were meaning when they said, when
yeah.
they called the Jews in Israel Palestine.
Well, I'll tell you what it was
Palestinians.
from my understanding of history. The Romans just got sick of the Jewish people fighting them because we fought them in the war, which led to the destruction of the temple and the Bar Kokhba revolts. These were very successful rebellions. There's a BBC documentary on the 6 greatest battles of the Roman Empire. So you can imagine how many battles they had over 400 years.
Right.
And the Jewish people was one of the greatest battles that they ever fought. So we were a very formidable army. We kicked out the Roman Empire for a couple of years in the Bar Kokhba, and so we were very, very powerful. However, they wanted to remove and stick a knife kind of in the Jewish eye, so they said, who were the biggest nemesis of the Jewish people? In ancient history, there was these people called the Philistines, and if you fact check this, you'll see that in ancient history, 2,500 years ago, they disappeared. So this is just one of many disinformation. Again, people have become kind of called to celeb, but the whole idea of gay, I remember when it wasn't appropriate to be gay, and suddenly it became this cool thing. It was Russian disinformation. And I have a friend that was a former KGB agent. He's now a religious Jew. And he says, very, very easy. What you do is you take an idea that some, radical has, and then they actually own various different newspapers and news outlets, and then you start to make that idea normal. As people get influenced by what they hear, because people don't want to be different than the media, because the media seems to them to be the public. And then they start to agree with it because it's the desire to be connected to the public that people have. And then, before they know it, you have the majority of America saying, yes, it's perfectly normal to, hello, good morning, to be gay, because they haven't understood how do we actually transition from not okay to okay. There was a mechanism. And so, anyway, make a long story short, that's not what this talk is about. This talk is about the idea that if you allow your desires to control you, then basically what are you? You are an animal. If you allow your mind and your convictions to control you, what are you? Well, you're basically God, because that is what your mind and convictions are. They are the holiness in you. And that's the war that we have. And so there are basically 3 types of categories. There's one person that...
It's not just the mind, because
Yeah, so what you're saying is true, that it's not only the mind, you also have to have, the Rebbe made this point, you have to have God. Because if you just have the mind, like you were saying, the Germans before the war, they had the best universities, smartest people, because they also had the same problem. You have one guy, he became the president, and then everybody else, they basically wanted to be part of the group, and they just accepted people, and Hitler said, he said, lucky for leaders that people don't think. We have now 23% of America that are what I call Obama cult members, and they literally don't think. Whatever he said is holy to them. He can say tomorrow, kill Jews, they'll go kill them because they don't think. Now, to be fair, there are 6% of Americans, these are based on Pew polls, these are very big facts, 6% that are Trump followers. But the fact is, it means that people are very likely to just follow, and the only objective reasoning is the Torah. The Torah says, don't kill. 10 Commandments, clear. So unless you put God as your God, and the God of the Bible, because we see that we have gods, you have Arabs that are putting, Muhammad, and really all of terrorism is just following Muhammad. People that think that these are people that don't follow Islam are wrong. If you know anything about Islam, they're following Islam to the T. It's actually the normal Muslims that are not following the Quran. They're the better ones. But the ones that are actually following the Quran, these guys are following, it's called the Salafists. They take Muhammad himself was the biggest terrorist that ever existed. He was a sadist of the epic proportion. He killed Jews, he raped the women as he was murdering their husbands. I don't think any of the terrorists are as sadistic as Muhammad was. And so, basically, they're just following his lead. And so, but anyway, getting back to the point is that if a human being, like, you're right, it's not enough to use your mind. Einstein himself, who was a great mind, said the mind can't lead. You have to have God. And not only just God, you have to have the God of the Bible. And with all due respect, you have to literally have what the rabbis tell you what the Bible is. The truth is, the Old Testament is pretty clear. Don't kill, don't kill. So that's why Christianity is redeemable.
Don't murder.
Don't murder. Yes.
The difference between don't kill and
yes,
don't murder.
Yes, that's true. That is true. There are times to kill in self-defense, etc., wars of self-defense, but don't murder. That's a very good point. So Christianity, ironically, is redeemable because they believe fundamentally in the Old Testament, and the Old Testament is the correct path of ethics and morality. The problem with Islam is that they say that they believe that the Torah is prophecy, but they say all the previous prophecies are not true or there were mistakes, and only the Quran is true. It's the only book without mistakes. Now, according to themselves, they should be burning the Quran, because according to them, if I think Muhammad said, if there are any contradictions in the Quran, it means that this book is not true. And I started reading the Quran. I wanted to know what was going on, and suddenly my head started to spin. I think, why is my head spinning? Because he's contradicting himself in the same sentence. Like the sky is black, the sky is blue. It's like literally like somebody that didn't know how to write two sentences together.
So very interesting.
And the other thing that's really a lot of people don't understand is that so you got the Sunnis and the Shiites, right? You have 200 million Sunnis, and 200 million Shiites and 1.4 billion or something Sunnis. Yeah. So the thing is that Iran, they are the Shiites, and they believe, and they're kind of the bastion of that. They believe that if Israel is a country, then Islam is wrong. And that's why they'll never accept Israel as a country. That's why they want to destroy it. Now, you could ask yourself a question that if you believe in God, why can't you allow God to take care of these things? But the truth is that it's not God, it's their own egos that are playing out, because if it was God, they would allow God. And they also have a belief that when the world will be filled with blood up to a horse's knee, the Messiah will come, which is a real reason. I asked an Iranian, and this is what he told me. This is the real reason they're trying to get nukes. They want to blow up the world, and because they believe the Messiah will come then. But again, if you believe in God, why can't you let God do it? So the answer is that their ego is so attached to their faith that they're not really faith-based people. They're ego-based people with a faith. So the bottom line is that the complete tzaddik is somebody that not only controls, because we all have an animal soul. Well, if you didn't have instincts, you wouldn't get hungry. So it's important to have instincts, but it's important to direct the instincts. So you basically have two levels that you can be on. The level of the Beinoni. The Beinoni knows the Torah, knows what's right, what's wrong, and he aligns himself, he controls himself to do what's right or what's wrong. And then you have the level of the tzaddik, which he does more than that. He has such a great love for Hashem, and this is really our goal, and in davening to evoke this love, that the animal soul itself, the love of the animal itself becomes the love of the godly soul. The godly soul, the animal itself, becomes the godly soul. It loves like the godly soul. Now in this you have two levels. You have the level of the complete tzaddik. And the complete tzaddik's love is so great that there's just nothing but this love. Like the Rebbe, he was just 100%. I'm sure this happened to you. The Baal Shem Tov says when a God calls you, like you get called to be a Baal Tshuva, you get like this year of a high. Like, did you have that? Like, wow, you saw this thing so clearly. It was amazing. I had that year. That year, like my love for Hashem, my convictions, my understanding were like on fire. Eventually he takes that away because he wants it to be, that was something he gave you. He wants it to come from you. He wants it to be growth. So in conclusion, we have to understand there are 6 levels, because the Rebbe adds a level. There is the complete tzaddik. There's the incomplete tzaddik. There's the Beinoni. There's the wicked person that is good, and the wicked person that is bad. And then the highest level. So the complete tzaddik is one whose love for Hashem is just complete. Then the incomplete tzaddik is somebody who loves Hashem very much. His animal soul also loves Hashem, but it's not 100% because we can see that his hatred towards evil is not 100, and hatred towards evil means that his love towards good is not. As we said yesterday, if you love your son very much, you hate very much the person that hurts your son. Then you have the in-between, the Beinoni, which is not such an in-between guy. This is the guy that controls his animal soul because he knows what's right. He inspires himself during tefillah, during davening, and in his inspiration, he gives himself the motivation to always do what's right. Then you have kind of the average person. The average person, well, we're sometimes good, we're sometimes bad. But the difference between the average person and the very bad person is that the average person has remorse. He feels bad when he does bad. But we can get ourselves to such a low level that the animal soul takes over and we take pleasure in our evil. That's like the drug addict that he's happy to be a drug addict. There's one drug addict that he at least feels that he doesn't want to be. He's ashamed of it. But the other person that has no shame, it's like he's just become an animal. That's what an animal does. It just cocks in the street. It has no shame. It's not okay. And the truth is, even a dog has a little shame. You look at a dog, afterwards they have a little shame. So a person that loses shame, they revel in their own evil. This is like the lowest of the low. Sure, like the Arabs, but to be
That's worse than
right.
What they did was worse than any animal would do.
Right, exactly, absolutely.
You would be insulting animals to call them animals.
Exactly, and no animal would be as evil as these people. And to think that there are people that support them, because again, people don't realize what's happened. Obama really is part of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the largest terrorist organization, and they basically they get into government positions all over the world, and they effectively do everything for Islam. He created ISIS. I mean, the whole war in Syria. He put the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. The civil war in Yemen. He destroyed, the civil war in Libya. I mean, this guy he's got literally over 1 million dead bodies on his hand, and the stupid left don't get it because they can't think for themselves. It's actually, Pew poll shows there basically 45% of the Democratic Party are Obama cult members. And and the conservatives, 45%, that's the main of the Republican Party, they're independents. They're just like myself. I would go for the Republicans because they're closer to my value system, but I don't consider myself Republican, right? I'm not a cult member. We're independents. We're independent thinkers, which makes us much smarter, as polls show. But in any event, the most important thing to the equation is that what a lot of people don't realize what Obama did is he brought in, right, all these refugees, right? He was telling everyone, who are these refugees? These are terrorists. So now we have terrorists all over America, and they coordinated with Hamas to create these kind of demonstrations. And of course, again, the liberals, they don't really have courage. So it's called.
Sorry, they don't have an active brain cell between them. Brain cells that's just inactive.
Well, I would say that they're part of a cult, meaning cult members. They regress. People that allow the group think to influence their thinking, they regress their own thinking. They have to ask themselves, okay, what do I actually believe independent of what my group believes? And if you can't say that I think differently from my group, then you don't. And that means that you're not thinking at all, right? Simple equation. Again, can you say that you think differently from your group? And if you think exactly the same as your group, it means you're not thinking at all. And so you got to start saying to yourself, well, if Obama told me to kill, would I kill? Am I just, could I become a Nazi? Because that's how Nazis happened. So just to conclude, the most important thing in life actually is the highest level, which is called Yelchu Machayil Choil. We go from level to level. And this is the level the Mashiach level that I think that most of us are on today. 62% of the world have a personal relationship with God, which is you realize that you're not God. You're here to grow. And Hashem is leading us everything moment in time, in space. We're being led in a journey of growth. And that's the infinite level, because we're all like a tree, like we're a whole forest. Each one of us is growing. L'chaim v'levracha.